Imagine a civilization so powerful, it lasted over 3,000 years, where kings ruled as gods, monuments defied time, and even the tiniest amulet held magical power. From mummies preserved better than modern corpses, to ships that crossed the Red Sea for incense from lands lost to history. Ancient Egypt wasn't just history, it was a civilization that touched eternity. And today, its secrets still whisper across the sands. Are you ready to step into the world of pharaohs, gods, and wonders that still amaze the world? Welcome, and thank you for joining another quiet journey with dreamy science stories. Tonight, we travel far beyond the present moment, drifting gently back through the deep corridors of time. Our destination is ancient Egypt, a civilization that flourished for more than 3,000 years along the fertile banks of the Nile River. For much of the ancient world, Egypt was not simply another kingdom. It was a center of power, culture, and mystery. Its monuments rose from the desert like mountains carved by human hands, so vast and precise that even today we still debate exactly how they were built. Its temples whispered with prayers to gods who were believed to walk among the living. And its rulers were not merely kings, but divine figures whose authority stretched from earth to the heavens. In this land, entire cities appeared and disappeared with the rhythm of the Nile's floods. The river itself was life, bringing fertile soil, guiding trade, and shaping the calendar of a people who carefully watched the movement of the stars. Religion, politics, science, and daily life blended together into a single worldview where the earthly and the divine were never truly separate. But perhaps the most fascinating mystery of Egypt was its relationship with death. For the Egyptians, death was not an ending. It was a transformation, a doorway into another existence that could last forever if the proper rituals were followed. They believed the soul required a preserved body, sacred words, and divine protection to navigate the afterlife safely. Every grain of desert sand hides a fragment of this story. Some pieces have already been uncovered by archaeologists and historians. Others remain buried beneath the shifting dunes, waiting patiently for the moment when human curiosity will reveal them once more. Tonight, we will step quietly into that ancient world. We will move from the glittering gold of royal burial masks to the silent gaze of the Sphinx at sunrise. From cities lost beneath the desert sands to the celestial patterns that guided the pharaohs and their priests. Each moment is a small window into a civilization that refuses to fade, no matter how many centuries pass. Together, we will explore 100 small fragments of this extraordinary culture. Some are well known. Others are small details that reveal just how thoughtful, complex, and imaginative the ancient Egyptians truly were. And before we begin our journey, if these calm explorations help you relax, unwind, or gently end your day, consider supporting the channel by liking the video or subscribing. You are also always welcome to share your thoughts or reflections in the comments below. It helps others discover these quiet journeys as well, one curious and sleepy listener at a time. Now take a slow breath, settle comfortably, and let the sands of time carry us back. The long and sacred process of mummification. For the ancient Egyptians, preserving the body after death was not simply a tradition. It was a sacred responsibility. The process known as mummification could take as long as 70 days to complete, and every step was guided by religious beliefs about the soul and the afterlife. The first stage involved carefully removing the internal organs from the body. These organs were not discarded. Instead, they were preserved separately in special containers known as canopic jars, each protected by a different deity. Meanwhile, the empty body cavity was carefully cleaned and prepared. After this came the most important stage, dehydration. The body was covered and packed with a natural mineral salt called natron, which slowly drew moisture out of the tissues. Without moisture, bacteria could not cause decay, allowing the body to remain intact for centuries. This drying process alone could last more than 40 days. Once the body was completely dried, priests began the careful work of restoration. Oils and fragrant resins were applied to the skin to keep it supple. The body was then wrapped in long layers of fine linen cloth, sometimes hundreds of meters in length. Between these wrappings, protective amulets were often placed to guard the deceased against spiritual dangers in the afterlife. Throughout the entire ritual, priests recited sacred prayers and invocations, calling upon gods such as Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the dead, to watch over the process. The care devoted to this preparation reflected a deeply held belief. The body was the home of the soul. If the body survived, the spirit could return to it, allowing the person to continue enjoying the pleasures of the afterlife for eternity. The heart, center of thought, memory, and identity. Modern science tells us that the brain is responsible for thought and emotion. But to the ancient Egyptians, the heart held that role. They believed the heart was the center of intelligence, memory, and feeling. It was the place where a person's true character resided. In their view, the heart stored a lifetime of experiences, intentions, and moral choices. Because of this belief, the heart was treated with extraordinary respect. During the process of mummification, nearly every internal organ was removed from the body. The lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines were carefully preserved in canopic jars. But the heart was usually left exactly where it belonged, resting inside the chest. In cases where the heart had been damaged, priests sometimes replaced it with a sacred heart scarab amulet, ensuring that the spiritual balance of the individual remained intact. To lose one's heart in the afterlife was unthinkable. Without it, a soul would lose its identity, its memory, and its place in the eternal order of the universe. Why the brain was removed? Interestingly, while the heart was considered essential, the brain was not given the same importance. Ancient Egyptian embalmers believed the brain served little purpose in the afterlife. Thought and memory, they believed, belonged entirely to the heart. Because of this, the brain was usually removed during the mummification process. Using delicate hooked tools inserted through the nasal cavity, embalmers carefully broke apart the brain tissue and removed it piece by piece. In some cases, the brain was first liquefied before being extracted. Once removed, the skull cavity was rinsed and filled with linen or resin to maintain the shape of the head. As a result, very few ancient mummies still contain their original brains. Ironically, this practice means that modern scientists have lost what could have been a remarkable source of biological information about ancient Egyptians. Yet from the perspective of the people who performed the ritual, preserving the brain simply was not necessary. The true essence of a person lived in the heart and in the spiritual protections surrounding the body. The weighing of the heart. In Egyptian belief, death did not immediately grant entrance into the afterlife. Instead, every soul had to pass a final test. This judgment took place in a mythical location known as the Hall of Two Truths. There, the god Anubis placed the heart of the deceased onto one side of a large scale. On the other side rested a single feather belonging to Ma'at, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. The test was simple but profound. If the heart weighed less than the feather, it meant the individual had lived a life of honesty and harmony. Their soul would then be allowed to pass into the field of reeds, a paradise where life continued in perfect peace and abundance. But if the heart was heavier than the feather, weighed down by wrongdoing or dishonesty, the consequences were severe. A terrifying creature known as Ammit, part lion, part crocodile, and part hippopotamus, waited nearby. If the heart failed the test, Ammit would devour it. The soul would then cease to exist entirely. This concept was so central to Egyptian culture that the scene appears in countless tomb paintings and papyrus texts. It served as a powerful reminder to live in accordance with Ma'at, the principle of truth, balance, and moral order. Thoth, the divine record keeper. During this solemn judgment, another important figure stood beside the scales. This was Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and knowledge. Often depicted with the head of an ibis bird or as a sacred baboon, Thoth served as the divine scribe of the gods. His role during the weighing ceremony was to record the final result of the trial. If the soul passed the test, Thoth documented the verdict, ensuring that the individual would be welcomed into eternal life. If the soul failed, his record confirmed the judgment. To the ancient Egyptians, writing was not simply a practical tool. It was a sacred act capable of shaping reality itself. Once Thoth inscribed the result of the judgment, the outcome became permanent, woven forever into the fabric of the cosmos. Games played for eternity. Among the many fascinating scenes painted inside Egyptian tombs, one appears again and again. The tomb owner is shown sitting calmly before a board game. Often the game depicted is Senet, a popular board game played throughout ancient Egypt. But in the tomb paintings, the player often sits alone, as if competing against an unseen opponent. To the Egyptians, Senet was more than entertainment. It symbolized the soul's journey through the afterlife. Each square on the board represented a stage of that journey, some safe, others dangerous. Winning the game meant safely reaching the final destination, eternal life. By portraying themselves playing Senet in their tomb decorations, the deceased expressed confidence in their ability to navigate the spiritual trials ahead. It also hinted at something wonderfully human, the hope that even in eternity, there would still be moments for leisure, reflection, and play. The first pyramid ever built. Long before the famous pyramids of Giza were constructed, a revolutionary structure appeared in the Egyptian landscape. Around 2670 BCE, a king named Djoser commissioned an ambitious new tomb at Saqqara. His brilliant architect, Imhotep, designed something entirely unprecedented. Instead of building a traditional flat-roofed tomb called a mastaba, Imhotep stacked several of them on top of each other in gradually smaller layers. The result was the step pyramid, the first pyramid in history. Rising toward the sky in a series of stone terraces, the structure symbolized the king's ascent into the heavens. It was more than a burial site. It was a statement of divine authority and eternal power. Though smaller and less polished than the pyramids that would follow at Giza, Djoser's monument still stands today, over 4,500 years later, a weathered yet unmistakable testament to human ambition. It marked the beginning of a building tradition that would shape the image of ancient Egypt for thousands of years. The Sphinx may once have been brilliantly painted. Today, the Great Sphinx of Giza appears as a weathered monument carved from pale limestone, its surface worn smooth by thousands of years of desert winds. Yet archaeologists have discovered small but intriguing traces of red pigment on parts of its face, suggesting that the statue was once far more colorful than it appears today. In its original form, the Sphinx may have been vividly painted. Its human face might have been coated in deep reddish tones, while the royal headdress could have displayed striking shades of blue and yellow. The eyes may have been carefully outlined with dark, coal-like pigments to give them a dramatic and lifelike intensity. Imagine standing on the Giza Plateau more than 4,000 years ago. Under the blazing Egyptian sun, this colossal guardian would not have blended quietly into the sand. Instead, it would have stood out as a dazzling, almost supernatural presence. With the powerful body of a lion and the serene face of a king, the Sphinx symbolized strength, wisdom, and divine authority. Over centuries, however, the relentless forces of nature slowly erased its colors. Wind carried fine grains of sand across its surface, grinding away the layers of paint. Rain, rare but powerful in the desert, may also have contributed to the fading of its vibrant skin. What remains today is the bare limestone skeleton of what was once a living monument of color. Yet when we imagine it as it once appeared, bright, regal, and commanding, the Sphinx transforms from a silent ruin into a powerful guardian watching eternally over the pyramids, its gaze fixed toward the rising sun each morning. The Great Pyramid's alignment is astonishingly precise. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest of the pyramids at Giza, is one of the most precisely aligned structures ever built by human hands. Modern measurements show that the pyramid is aligned to true north with an error of less than 1/20th of a degree. Even by modern engineering standards, this level of accuracy is extraordinary. What makes it even more remarkable is that the builders achieved it more than 4,000 years ago, without the benefit of modern surveying equipment. How did they do it? Many researchers believe the ancient surveyors relied on careful observations of the stars. One theory suggests they tracked the movement of specific stars as they rotated across the night sky. By marking the moment when two stars aligned vertically, they could establish a near-perfect north-south orientation. Considering the massive scale of the pyramid's base, even a tiny miscalculation could have created a visible error in the structure's alignment. Yet the builders managed to achieve astonishing precision. For the Egyptians, this alignment was likely more than just an engineering accomplishment. It may have held deep symbolic meaning. By orienting the pyramid toward the cardinal directions in the heavens, the builders connected the pharaoh's tomb to the cosmic order of the universe. In that sense, the pyramid was not merely a tomb made of stone. It was something closer to a cosmic instrument, rooted firmly in the earth while remaining spiritually aligned with the movements of the heavens. A calendar guided by a single star. The survival of ancient Egypt depended heavily on the annual flooding of the Nile River. These floods deposited rich, fertile soil across the land, making agriculture possible in an otherwise harsh desert environment. Predicting the arrival of this flood was therefore essential. The Egyptians found their answer in the sky. Each year, during midsummer, the brilliant star Sirius appeared just above the eastern horizon shortly before sunrise. This event, known as the heliacal rising of Sirius, occurred after the star had been hidden from view for several months. Remarkably, this celestial appearance usually happened shortly before the Nile began to swell with floodwaters. Recognizing this connection, Egyptian astronomers built an entire 365-day calendar around the rising of Sirius. The year was divided into 3 seasons, each closely tied to the agricultural cycle. The first season was inundation, when the Nile flooded the fields. The second was growth, when crops sprouted and matured. The third was harvest, when the grain was gathered and stored. Each season contained 4 months of 30 days. At the end of the year, 5 additional days were added. These days were considered sacred festival days, celebrating the mythical births of several important gods. This star-based calendar proved remarkably effective. Although it drifted slowly over centuries due to the absence of leap years, it remained one of the most practical and consistent timekeeping systems of the ancient world. It stands as a beautiful example of how the Egyptians blended astronomy, agriculture, and religion into a single understanding of time. One of the world's earliest writing systems. Around 3200 BCE, ancient Egypt developed one of the earliest known writing systems in human history, hieroglyphic writing. These symbols were far more complex than a simple alphabet. Hieroglyphs combined several different types of signs. Some represented sounds, similar to letters in modern alphabets. Others represented entire words. Still others expressed broader ideas or concepts. Because of this flexibility, hieroglyphic writing could communicate both practical information and deeply symbolic meanings. In its earliest form, hieroglyphic writing appeared on monumental surfaces such as temple walls, royal monuments, and tomb inscriptions. These texts recorded historical events, religious prayers, royal achievements, and sacred rituals. But the Egyptians believed writing itself possessed a form of magical power. By carving words into stone or painting them onto papyrus, they believed those words could continue to exist forever. For this reason, scribes occupied an important position in Egyptian society. From a young age, they trained for years to master hundreds of symbols and their many possible meanings. Over time, additional writing systems developed alongside hieroglyphs. One of these, called hieratic, was a more simplified and cursive script used for everyday documents. Yet the beauty and symbolic richness of traditional hieroglyphs ensured their continued use in temples and monuments for thousands of years. Each symbol was both a picture and a message, a small piece of meaning preserved across the centuries. Hieroglyphs blended sound, image, and meaning. Unlike modern alphabets that rely mainly on individual letters, Egyptian hieroglyphs formed a hybrid writing system. Some symbols represented single consonant sounds. Others represented combinations of sounds, while many conveyed entire words or ideas. For example, an image of the sun disk might represent the word Ra, referring to the sun god. In another context, the same symbol might simply mean sun or day. To help clarify meaning, scribes often added a final symbol, known as a determinative. This sign did not have a sound but indicated the category of the word, such as whether it referred to a person, a place, an action, or an abstract concept. This layering of phonetic sounds, symbolic meaning, and visual imagery created a writing system of extraordinary richness. But it also meant that reading and writing required years of study. Only trained scribes and priests typically possessed full literacy. As a result, Egyptian inscriptions were never just text. They were art, language, and symbolism combined, carefully designed to endure across eternity. Priests were also astronomers. In ancient Egypt, the study of the heavens was deeply connected to religion. Temple priests carefully observed the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Their observations helped determine the timing of religious festivals, agricultural activities, and royal ceremonies. Many temples were deliberately aligned with important celestial events. On certain days of the year, the rising sun might shine directly through the temple's entrance and illuminate a sacred statue deep within the sanctuary. The Egyptians also associated many constellations with their gods. The night sky itself was imagined as the body of the goddess Nut, arching protectively over the earth. Astronomical knowledge also had practical value. It helped guide navigation along the Nile and contributed to predicting the life-giving floods. Because this knowledge was closely guarded within temples, it reinforced the idea that the cosmos, the gods, and the pharaoh's rule were all connected parts of the same divine order. The Egyptian idea of eternity. Eternity held a central place in Egyptian philosophy and religion. Interestingly, the Egyptians used more than one word to describe it. One important term was jet, which referred to a timeless, unchanging form of eternity. This was the eternal state inhabited by the gods and the preserved spirit of the deceased. Another term was nihe, which described cyclical time, the repeating rhythms of nature such as the rising sun, the flooding Nile, and the turning of the seasons. When these two concepts appeared together in tomb inscriptions, they created a powerful vision of eternal life, existence that was both permanent and continually renewed. A king might be promised life for all jet and all nihe, meaning life that never ends and yet is constantly reborn. To the Egyptians, eternity was not an abstract philosophical idea. It was a real destination that could be achieved through ritual, memory, and the careful construction of monuments designed to last forever. Beer as a daily necessity. In ancient Egypt, beer was not merely a drink for celebration. It was a fundamental part of everyday life. Made from partially baked barley bread that was soaked in water and allowed to ferment, Egyptian beer was thick, cloudy, and rich in nutrients. It contained grains, yeast, and natural sugars that made it surprisingly filling. Workers, including those who helped build royal monuments, were often paid partly in bread and beer. In this way, beer functioned both as food and as a form of currency. Even children sometimes drank a diluted version because fermented beverages were often safer than untreated river water. Beer also played a role in religion. It was frequently offered to the gods during temple rituals, and placed inside tombs to nourish the dead in the afterlife. Brewing was commonly carried out in large batches and was often overseen by women. Recipes varied widely, producing beers that could be sweet, sour, strong, or mild depending on ingredients and fermentation time. Far from the clear golden drink familiar today, Egyptian beer resembled something closer to a liquid bread, thick, hearty, and sustaining. Running out of beer in an Egyptian household was no small matter. It could signal genuine hardship. Bread that slowly wore down teeth. Bread was the other pillar of the Egyptian diet. However, the process of grinding grain into flour often introduced an unexpected ingredient: sand. Grain was ground using stone tools, and over time small particles of stone mixed with the flour. When baked into bread, these tiny fragments made the loaves gritty and abrasive. Archaeologists studying mummies frequently find evidence of severe dental wear. Many Egyptians suffered from worn teeth, cracked enamel, and painful abscesses. Surprisingly, this damage was not caused by poor hygiene, but simply by a lifetime of chewing coarse bread. Despite these drawbacks, bread remained essential to daily life. It was baked in many shapes and varieties, from simple loaves to honey-sweetened festival treats. Villages often shared communal ovens where families baked their daily bread, filling the air with the warm smell of grain. Together, bread and beer formed the foundation of the Egyptian diet, sustaining farmers, artisans, priests, and even pharaohs. Yet over the decades, that same bread slowly ground down the smiles of an entire civilization. The pharaoh is both king and god. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was not simply a political ruler. He was believed to be a living god. The pharaoh was seen as the earthly representative of Horus, the falcon-headed god of kingship. At the same time, he was considered the son of Ra, the great sun god who traveled across the sky each day. Because of this divine status, the pharaoh held absolute authority. His primary responsibility was to maintain Ma'at, the cosmic order that kept the universe balanced and harmonious. In life, the pharaoh served as the bridge between humanity and the gods. Through rituals, temple offerings, and sacred ceremonies, he ensured that divine favor continued to flow into the land. In death, his role changed but did not end. The pharaoh was believed to become fully divine, joining the company of the gods in the afterlife. Even images of the pharaoh, statues, carvings, or golden masks, were believed to contain a portion of his spiritual power. To honor the pharaoh was therefore not just an act of political loyalty. It was an act of devotion to the divine order itself. The symbolic false beard of the pharaoh, one of the most distinctive symbols of Egyptian royalty, was the ceremonial false beard. This stylized beard was often worn during important rituals and official ceremonies. It was carefully braided and attached with straps around the ears. Interestingly, it was not limited to male rulers. Even female pharaohs, such as the famous Queen Hatshepsut, sometimes wore the false beard when depicted in royal regalia. The beard symbolized divine authority and eternal kingship. It echoed the appearance of certain gods, reinforcing the pharaoh's connection to the divine world. Through clothing, crowns, and symbols like the false beard, Egyptian rulers visually expressed their unique role as both human leaders and sacred beings. In the silent glow of ancient temple halls, where torchlight once flickered across carved stone walls, symbols of power and eternity revealed themselves in subtle, sacred forms. Among these was the curious and striking false beard worn by Egyptian rulers. At first glance, it may appear to be merely an ornamental accessory, but in truth it carried a far deeper meaning. The false beard connected the living ruler directly to Osiris, the divine lord of resurrection and the eternal realm beyond death. Osiris was often portrayed with a long, narrow ceremonial beard that curved elegantly outward, a symbol of divine authority and eternal life. To wear such a beard was to visually proclaim that the ruler standing before the people was not merely human. Instead, The pharaoh existed as a bridge between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. These ceremonial beards were carefully crafted works of art. Many were made from precious metals such as gold, sometimes inlaid with intricate details that caught the light of the Egyptian sun. They were attached to the ruler's head using fine straps that wrapped behind the ears or across the crown. Though artificial, the beard carried immense spiritual weight. Even rulers who did not naturally grow beards adopted the sacred symbol. One of the most fascinating examples is Hatshepsut, a powerful female pharaoh who ruled during the 18th dynasty. In statues and temple reliefs, she is frequently depicted wearing the same ceremonial beard as male rulers. This was not an attempt to disguise her identity. Rather, it was a declaration that she too embodied the divine authority of kingship. In this way, the false beard became one of the most recognizable visual signals of ancient Egypt's unique fusion of politics and spirituality. A ruler did not simply govern the land, they represented cosmic order itself. When a pharaoh stood before their people wearing that sacred beard, they symbolized a living continuation of divine power flowing from the gods into the world of humans. And in those silent statues that still stand beneath desert skies, the beard remains, a small but powerful reminder of a civilization that saw no clear boundary between the sacred and the political. If we step quietly into the everyday lives of ancient Egyptians, we find another remarkable feature of their society, one that surprises many modern observers. In a world where women in many ancient civilizations had limited rights, Egyptian women often enjoyed a level of legal independence that was unusual for its time. Women in ancient Egypt could own property in their own names. They could inherit land from their families, buy and sell goods, and even establish contracts recognized by law. In the bustling markets that once lined the banks of the Nile, women participated in trade and business with a degree of autonomy that would not appear in many other societies for centuries. They could manage estates, oversee agricultural lands, and appear in court as legal equals alongside men. Documents discovered by archaeologists reveal women signing contracts, managing financial matters, and defending their rights through legal channels. The voices of these women echo faintly through papyrus records, preserved across thousands of years of history. Some wealthy women became patrons of temples, funding offerings to the gods or commissioning works of art and architecture. Others controlled large agricultural estates that produced grain, oil, and wine for the economy of the kingdom. Political leadership, however, remained mostly in male hands. Yet even here, there were notable exceptions. Queens, royal mothers, and high priestesses sometimes wielded tremendous influence within the palace and religious institutions. The foundation of this relative balance lay within an essential concept of Egyptian philosophy, known as Ma'at. Ma'at represented harmony, balance, and justice, the ideal state in which the universe functioned properly. Maintaining this equilibrium was considered the duty of both rulers and ordinary citizens alike. Because balance was seen as a natural principle of the cosmos, women's participation in society was viewed as part of maintaining that harmony. As a result, Egyptian women were often able to engage in economic and social life more freely than their counterparts in civilizations that would rise centuries later, including those of Greece and Rome. Under the endless Egyptian sky, beside the life-giving waters of the Nile, a society quietly flourished where legal identity and personal agency extended further than many would expect from such an ancient world. Few figures from antiquity capture the imagination quite like Cleopatra VII. Her name alone conjures images of golden palaces, political intrigue, and the twilight of an ancient civilization. Yet one of the most intriguing truths about Cleopatra is that she was not fully Egyptian by blood. She belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of rulers descended from Macedonian generals who took control of Egypt after the conquests of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BCE. For generations, These rulers maintained Greek language, customs, and political traditions while governing an Egyptian population with an ancient cultural identity stretching back thousands of years. But Cleopatra was different. Unlike many of her predecessors, she chose to embrace Egyptian culture rather than remain distant from it. Historical records suggest that she was the first of her dynasty to learn and speak the Egyptian language. In religious ceremonies, she even presented herself as the living embodiment of Isis, one of Egypt's most beloved deities. This blending of identities allowed Cleopatra to become something rare in history, a bridge between two civilizations. Greek heritage and Egyptian tradition converged in her reign, creating a ruler who understood not only political strategy, but also the symbolic power of cultural identity. Through this union of worlds, Cleopatra shaped the final chapter of Egypt's long and extraordinary story. Within the royal palaces of ancient Egypt, marriage sometimes followed customs that may seem unfamiliar or even shocking to modern audiences. Among the royal family, pharaohs occasionally married their own sisters or half-sisters. This practice was not driven by romance, but by symbolism and political necessity. Egyptian mythology offered a powerful precedent. The divine siblings Isis and Osiris were both brother and sister, and husband and wife. Their sacred union represented cosmic harmony and the continuity of divine power. Royal marriages echoed this mythology. By marrying within the immediate family, pharaohs reinforced the idea that their bloodline was sacred and directly descended from the gods themselves. Of course, these royal unions were primarily symbolic and political. Pharaohs often maintained multiple wives and concubines beyond the formal queen. Yet the marriage between royal siblings ensured that the line of succession remained tightly controlled within the divine household. In this way, the royal family mirrored the divine family of the gods, strengthening the pharaoh's identity not simply as a ruler, but as a living embodiment of divine kingship. In Egyptian homes, temples, and quiet sunlit courtyards, another creature moved gracefully through daily life, the cat. In ancient Egypt, cats were far more than companions. They were sacred animals associated with the protective goddess Batet. Batet was often depicted as either a lioness or a gentle woman with the head of a cat. Over time, her image evolved into that of a graceful domestic cat, symbolizing protection, fertility, and the warmth of home. Cats served a practical purpose as well. They protected grain stores from mice and rats, safeguarding the food supply of households and entire communities along the Nile. Because of this, cats became deeply cherished members of Egyptian homes. Families treated them with affection, feeding and caring for them as honored guardians of the household. To harm a cat, even accidentally, was considered a grave offense. Historical accounts from writers such as Diodorus Siculus describe moments when crowds reacted with outrage when a cat was injured. The protection of cats was not merely cultural, it was spiritual. Egyptians believed that harming a cat could anger Batet herself. Cats were so beloved that many were mummified after death and buried with their owners, ensuring their companionship would continue in the afterlife. In Egyptian belief, the bond between humans and animals did not end with death. Instead, it flowed forward into eternity, just like the endless waters of the Nile. Across Egypt, vast catacombs also hold another remarkable testament to the spiritual bond between humans and animals. Millions of birds, specifically ibises, were carefully preserved through mummification. The ibis was sacred to Thoth, the divine patron of knowledge, language, and the written word. With its slender legs and elegantly curved beak, the ibis seemed to embody a quiet wisdom. Egyptians believed the bird represented Thoth himself walking upon the earth. Pilgrims traveling to temples would offer mummified ibises as sacred gifts to the god. Archaeologists have discovered vast underground chambers filled with these offerings, millions of carefully wrapped birds placed within clay jars. Each one represented a prayer, a hope, or a gesture of devotion sent across the boundary between human life and divine presence. Ancient Egyptian temples were not positioned randomly across the landscape. Their construction often followed precise astronomical alignments, linking sacred architecture with the movements of the heavens. Many temples were designed so that sunlight would enter the inner sanctuary at specific times of the year, illuminating the statue of the god within. One of the most breathtaking examples stands at Abu Simbel, built by Ramesses II. Twice each year, the rising sun travels deep into the temple's interior, lighting the seated statues of the gods beside the image of Ramesses himself. These alignments were more than architectural achievements. They were cosmic rituals in stone. By synchronizing temples with the sun's path, the Egyptians connected earthly worship with the rhythms of the universe. To the ancient Egyptians, the sun itself was not merely a star shining in the sky. It was the living god Ra. Each morning, Ra sailed across the heavens in his radiant solar boat, bringing light and life to the world below. But when evening came and the sun dipped beneath the horizon, his journey was far from over. Ra descended into the mysterious underworld, traveling through 12 shadowy regions that corresponded to the hours of the night. During this dangerous voyage, he faced his greatest enemy, the monstrous serpent Apophis, a creature that embodied chaos and darkness. With the help of other gods, Ra fought through these dangers night after night, eventually emerging again at dawn. To the Egyptians, sunrise was not simply the start of a new day. It was the victory of order over chaos, light over darkness, life over oblivion. And so the sun rose again, just as it had for thousands of years, over the desert, the Nile, and the timeless monuments of ancient Egypt. Along the dusty banks of the Nile, where wind carries grains of sand across ancient ruins, the people of Egypt quietly sought ways to heal the pains of everyday life. Even something as small as a toothache, so ordinary, yet so deeply uncomfortable, did not escape their attention. Within fragile scrolls of medical knowledge known as papyri, physicians recorded remedies meant to soothe the aching mouth. These ancient medical writings describe rinses and pastes made from mixtures of herbs, honey, and beer. Honey, valued not only for its sweetness but also for its natural antibacterial qualities, was often combined with crushed plants to create soothing treatments for inflamed gums. The remedies may seem simple by modern standards, yet they reveal a thoughtful attempt to ease suffering through observation and experimentation. Archaeologists studying Egyptian mummies have even discovered replacement teeth inserted into the jaws of the deceased. Whether these dental additions served a practical purpose during life or were placed ceremonially after death remains uncertain. Yet their presence hints at an intriguing truth. Ancient Egyptians were not indifferent to dental health. In a society where spoken words held ritual power, where eating was central to life, and where bodily purity carried spiritual significance, the health of the mouth mattered deeply. Even in this early stage of medical understanding, we see the beginnings of a long human journey. The desire to relieve pain, preserve the body, and maintain harmony between physical health and spiritual well-being. Deep within the tombs of Egypt's physicians and nobles, archaeologists have uncovered another fascinating glimpse into ancient medicine, surgical instruments crafted thousands of years ago. Among the burial goods placed beside the dead are bronze scalpels, slender needles, delicate forceps, and probing tools carefully shaped for medical use. Though time has dulled their edges, their craftsmanship speaks of careful design and practical purpose. These were not symbolic objects alone. They were tools used in real treatments carried out on living patients. Ancient medical papyri describe procedures that feel surprisingly familiar to modern readers. Physicians stitched wounds closed, set broken bones with splints, and drained painful abscesses. Many of these injuries likely came from the realities of daily life: labor in fields and quarries, construction work on massive monuments, or the violence of warfare along Egypt's borders. Yet Egyptian medicine never separated the physical body from the spiritual realm. Surgical treatments were often accompanied by prayers, incantations, and offerings to the gods. Healing in the Egyptian worldview required attention to both the visible body and the unseen forces believed to influence it. While some procedures may have been painful or only partially effective by modern standards, the presence of these tools tells us something profound. Surgery in ancient Egypt was not random or improvised. It was organized, respected, and practiced by individuals trained in both practical skill and sacred knowledge. In the quiet stillness of museum displays today, those bronze instruments remain as silent witnesses to humanity's long pursuit of healing. Egyptian medical texts reveal hundreds of treatments for ailments that plague daily life: headaches, stomach pain, skin conditions, hair loss, and many other discomforts that every generation must face. The remedies often combined practical herbal knowledge with ritual magic. A physician might prescribe a mixture of crushed herbs and honey to soothe a toothache, while also reciting protective words meant to drive away harmful spirits believed to cause illness. For baldness, some texts describe mixtures made from the fats of animals such as lions, crocodiles, or snakes. These unusual ingredients were rubbed into the scalp, while prayers invoked divine assistance for restoring hair. To modern readers, some of these prescriptions seem strange, even curious. Yet many ingredients used by Egyptian healers, garlic, onions, figs, and honey, are still recognized today for their beneficial health properties. What these ancient treatments reveal is a society deeply committed to healing. Illness was not simply accepted as fate. Instead, Egyptians believed that with the right combination of earthly remedies and divine protection, many ailments could be treated or prevented. The human desire to understand the body and to preserve its strength stretches back thousands of years, woven quietly into the medical wisdom of the Nile. In the warm golden light of Egyptian mornings, daily life often began with rituals of fragrance. Perfumes and scented oils were an essential part of Egyptian culture, blending beauty, spirituality, and personal care. Crafted from flowers, herbs, tree resins, and exotic spices, these aromatic oils were carefully blended into fragrant ointments. Wealthy Egyptians anointed their bodies with scented oils each day, protecting their skin from the dry desert air while surrounding themselves with pleasing aromas. Within temples, priests also used perfumes as part of sacred rituals. Statues of the gods were cleansed and anointed with aromatic oils, symbolically renewing the divine presence within the sanctuary. Certain scents carried deep spiritual meaning. Sacred resins such as frankincense and myrrh were burned in temple courtyards, their fragrant smoke rising slowly toward the heavens as offerings to the gods. Perfume making itself was a respected craft. Skilled artisans developed complex recipes passed carefully from generation to generation, some guarded like treasured secrets. Even in death, fragrance remained important. Tombs were stocked with jars of oils and perfumes, so that the deceased might remain fragrant and pure in the afterlife. A small but meaningful gesture toward eternal dignity. In ancient Egypt, cosmetics were not reserved only for beauty or luxury. Both men and women wore makeup daily, and its purposes extended far beyond appearance. Red ochre was applied to the lips and cheeks, adding color to the face. Dark pigments were carefully painted around the eyes, creating the iconic almond-shaped outlines so familiar in Egyptian art. These cosmetics served practical purposes as well. The desert sun was harsh, and dark-eye pigments helped reduce glare. Certain mineral ingredients may even have helped repel insects and reduce infections. But cosmetics also carried spiritual meaning. Many Egyptians believed that eye makeup offered protection against harmful forces and evil spirits. The carefully shaped lines around the eyes often echoed the form of the sacred symbol known as the Eye of Horus. The act of applying makeup each morning, therefore, became something more than simple grooming. It was a small daily ritual, a moment where beauty, health, and spiritual protection merged into a single gesture. Even the humblest households often owned small containers of pigment, showing that these practices were woven deeply into everyday Egyptian life. One of the most distinctive cosmetic materials used in Egypt was kohl, a dark powder made from finely ground minerals such as galena. When mixed with oils or fats, it created a paste that could be applied around the eyes with delicate tools. The dramatic eye outlines created by kohl became one of the most recognizable features of Egyptian art and culture. Yet beneath the striking appearance lay practical benefits. Kohl helped reduce the harsh brightness of sunlight reflecting off desert sand. It also acted as a barrier against insects and dust. Modern scientific studies even suggest that some compounds in kohl may have stimulated the body's immune defenses, helping to prevent certain eye infections common in dusty environments. In this way, the cosmetic became something more than decoration. It was protection, medicine, and symbolism all at once. Through the dark lines drawn carefully around the eyes, Egyptians carried a quiet connection to divine protection and the healing power of sacred symbols. When death came to an Egyptian household, the rituals that followed were often filled with emotion, ceremony, and deeply symbolic gestures. Among the participants at many funerals were professional mourners, women hired to publicly express grief through ritual lamentation. These mourners were skilled performers, trained in gestures of sorrow that echoed ancient myths. They wailed loudly, tore at their hair, and beat their chests in dramatic displays of mourning. Their actions imitated the legendary grief of Isis and Nephthys as they mourned the death of Osiris. These performances were not merely theatrical. They served a sacred purpose. Through ritualized mourning, the soul of the deceased was believed to be guided safely toward the afterlife. The cries of mourners echoing through ancient streets were therefore not only expressions of sorrow, they were part of a spiritual journey, helping the departed cross the mysterious boundary between worlds. The riches buried with Egyptian elites were immense. Gold jewelry, statues, furniture, chariots, and precious objects meant to accompany the dead into eternity. Yet such treasures inevitably tempted the living. Tomb robbery became one of the most serious crimes in ancient Egypt. Stealing from a tomb was not merely theft. It was believed to endanger the eternal soul of the deceased. Disturbing a burial could disrupt the delicate balance required for a peaceful afterlife. Legal records from the New Kingdom reveal harsh punishments for tomb robbers. Those caught could face severe beatings, mutilation, or execution. Ironically, some tombs were robbed by the very workers who had built them, individuals who knew the hidden corridors and secret entrances better than anyone. Despite the risks, tomb robbery persisted throughout Egyptian history. Even the royal necropolis of the Valley of the Kings was looted extensively within only a few centuries of its use. The eternal wealth intended for the afterlife often proved irresistible to those struggling in the world of the living. To deter such intrusions, some tomb owners carved ominous warnings onto walls and doorways. These inscriptions promised terrible consequences to anyone who dared disturb the dead. Some curses threatened illness, poverty, or misfortune. Others warned of eternal punishment after death. One ancient inscription declares that anyone entering without permission would have their neck seized like a bird, a vivid image meant to inspire fear. Whether these curses were truly believed in a supernatural sense or simply served as psychological deterrents remains a matter of debate among historians. Yet their presence reveals how seriously Egyptians took the protection of the dead. Even after life had ended, the peace of the tomb remained sacred. Despite centuries of exploration, Egypt still holds secrets beneath its sands. Modern technology, radar scanning, satellite imaging, and advanced sensors has revealed mysterious voids within ancient monuments that may hide undiscovered chambers. In 2017, researchers detected a large hidden space within the Great Pyramid of Giza, located above the Grand Gallery. The purpose of this mysterious chamber remains unknown, sparking ongoing debate among archaeologists. Elsewhere, entire cities lie buried beneath layers of desert sand. Beneath the fertile mud of the Nile Delta, ancient settlements remain hidden from view. Many scholars believe that numerous royal tombs have yet to be found, resting silently beneath the desert, their stories waiting patiently for discovery. Each new archaeological finding reminds us that Egypt's past is far from fully revealed. Beneath the endless horizon of sand, history continues to sleep. Among the carved reliefs of Egyptian temples are images that continue to puzzle scholars even today. Some depict strange animals unlike any known species. Others appear to show unusual hybrid creatures that combine features of multiple animals. In the Temple of Seti I at Abydos, certain carved shapes have sparked modern speculation because they resemble familiar objects. While some imaginative interpretations suggest advanced technology, most scholars believe these forms are simply overlapping carvings from different time periods. When later inscriptions were carved over earlier ones, fragments of both remain visible, creating shapes that appear mysterious to modern eyes. Yet even with logical explanations, these carvings remind us of how much remains open to interpretation within ancient art. Across thousands of years, symbols fade, meanings shift, and mysteries linger quietly in stone. One of the most important discoveries in the history of archaeology occurred in 1799, when French soldiers unearthed a dark stone slab near the Egyptian town of Rosetta. This artifact, now known as the Rosetta Stone, carried a royal decree written in 3 scripts: ancient Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Because scholars could already read Greek, the stone became the key to unlocking the mysterious hieroglyphic writing that had puzzled historians for centuries. Through years of careful study, the linguist Jean-François Champollion finally deciphered the system in the early 1820s. With that breakthrough, the silent monuments of Egypt suddenly began to speak again. Temple walls, tomb inscriptions, and ancient papyri revealed stories, prayers, laws, and poetry written thousands of years earlier. Today, the Rosetta Stone rests within the halls of the British Museum, its worn surface continuing to connect the modern world with one of humanity's oldest written languages. For the ancient Egyptians, the Nile River was not only a source of life, it was the main highway of the kingdom. Boats carried grain, stone blocks, soldiers, merchants, and travelers up and down its waters. Yet sometimes journeys required crossing land where no river flowed. To solve this problem, Egyptian boat builders created vessels designed to be dismantled. Wooden planks could be separated, ropes untied, and the boat's components carried across land by teams of workers. Once the journey reached water again, the boat could be reassembled and launched once more. In this clever design, we glimpse the ingenuity of a civilization that understood how to adapt its technologies to the rhythms of both river and desert. And along the endless Nile, beneath the slow drifting clouds of North Africa, these boats once moved quietly through history, carrying people, goods, and stories across one of the world's most remarkable civilizations. Ancient Egypt developed remarkable engineering solutions to overcome the natural challenges of the Nile. In some areas of the river, particularly where rocky cataracts disrupted navigation, large boats could not simply sail through. To solve this problem, Egyptian shipbuilders created vessels designed to be dismantled and transported across land before being rebuilt on the water. This innovation proved extremely useful during military expeditions, trading missions to distant lands, and royal journeys along the Nile. Soldiers could carry ship components around dangerous river obstacles and quickly reassemble them on the other side. This flexibility allowed Egypt to maintain strong connections between distant regions of the kingdom and beyond its borders. One of the most extraordinary examples of Egyptian shipbuilding skill is the famous Khufu ship discovered beside the Great Pyramid of Giza. This enormous wooden vessel was buried in pieces within a sealed pit, carefully preserved for the pharaoh's journey in the afterlife. When archaeologists reconstructed it, they discovered that the planks were fitted together with such precision that the ship could be assembled without nails. The craftsmanship of Egyptian shipwrights was extraordinary. Their vessels were both strong and adaptable, capable of traveling vast distances along the Nile and even across seas. Through these ingenious designs, Egypt remained connected to trade networks and cultural exchanges that stretched far beyond its desert borders. Long before the invention of paper, the ancient Egyptians created one of the world's first practical writing materials. It was called papyrus, produced from the inner pith of the papyrus plant that grew abundantly along the fertile banks of the Nile. To create papyrus sheets, craftsmen cut the plant into thin strips and laid them in two layers, one horizontal and the other vertical. These strips were then pressed together and dried, forming a smooth, flexible surface suitable for writing. Once finished, the sheets could be joined into long scrolls that scribes could easily store or transport. Compared with the heavy clay tablets used in other ancient civilizations, papyrus was lightweight and convenient. It transformed the way information was recorded and shared. Government records, religious texts, literature, personal letters, and scientific writings could all be preserved on these scrolls. Egypt soon became the main supplier of papyrus throughout the Mediterranean world. Merchants exported it to distant cultures, making it one of Egypt's most valuable trade goods. Thanks to Egypt's dry climate, many papyrus scrolls have survived for thousands of years. They preserve an extraordinary written record of ancient life, from legal documents and medical knowledge to poetry and everyday correspondence. Through these fragile sheets of plant fiber, the voices of ancient Egyptians continue to speak across millennia. While the towering pyramids and grand temples of Egypt often capture our imagination, some of the most touching artifacts from this civilization are far more personal. Among the surviving papyrus scrolls and pottery fragments are love poems written thousands of years ago. These poems reveal a side of Egyptian life that feels surprisingly familiar to modern readers. Their verses speak of longing, admiration, beauty, and affection. Some describe secret meetings between lovers, while others celebrate the joy of simply being near someone beloved. Many of the poems use vivid images drawn from nature. A lover's eyes might be compared to shining stars, while lips are likened to sweet wine or ripe fruit. The Nile's gentle waters, blooming flowers, and singing birds all appear as metaphors for romance and desire. Scholars believe many of these poems were composed for festivals or private gatherings, where music and poetry entertained guests. Others may have been personal expressions written simply for the joy of the moment. These ancient love poems remind us that beneath the monumental architecture and complex religion of Egypt lived ordinary people with emotions remarkably similar to our own. Across thousands of years, the language of love has changed little. Music played an important role in the spiritual and cultural life of ancient Egypt. It was not merely a form of entertainment, but was believed to possess powerful magical qualities. Musicians performed during religious ceremonies, festivals, royal processions, and household celebrations. Instruments such as harps, flutes, lyres, and drums produced rhythms and melodies that filled temple courtyards and palace halls. Certain musical compositions were believed to attract the favor of the gods. Others were thought to calm troubled spirits or promote healing in the sick. Because of this spiritual significance, temple musicians held respected positions within society. Some ancient hymns dedicated to Egyptian gods have even survived in written form. These songs were likely performed during sacred rituals, blending music, prayer, and ceremony into a single experience. During large public festivals, music transformed entire cities. Rhythmic drumming, dancing, and singing brought communities together in celebration, reinforcing the deep connection between art, religion, and everyday life in Egypt. Among the most important symbols in Egyptian art and religion was the elegant lotus flower. Floating upon the still waters of the Nile and temple lakes, the lotus represented one of the most powerful ideas in Egyptian belief: rebirth. Each night the lotus flower closed its petals and sank beneath the water's surface. With the rising sun, it reopened and emerged again into the light. This daily cycle mirrored the Egyptian understanding of death and renewal. In some creation myths, the universe itself began when a lotus flower rose from the primordial waters. From within its petals, the newborn sun god emerged, bringing light and life to the world. Artists carved lotus designs into temple columns, painted them on tomb walls, and shaped them into jewelry and decorative objects. The symbol appeared everywhere, from royal thrones to everyday household items. Lotus flowers were also placed in tombs as funerary offerings, symbolizing the hope that the deceased would experience their own rebirth in the afterlife. Floating quietly upon sacred waters, the lotus served as a constant reminder that life can emerge again from darkness. Egyptian religion is famous for its gods portrayed with both human and animal features. These striking forms were not intended to represent literal creatures, but symbolic expressions of divine qualities. For example, the god Horus was often shown with the head of a falcon. Falcons soar high above the earth, making them perfect symbols of kingship and the sky. The jackal-headed Anubis guarded tombs and guided souls through the underworld, while the ibis-headed Thoth represented knowledge and learning. These combinations blended human intelligence with the special abilities associated with particular animals. Through such imagery, Egyptians expressed complex religious ideas in visual form. The gods themselves were believed to be capable of appearing in many different shapes. In some stories they appeared fully human, while in others they took the form of animals or cosmic forces. This fluidity reflected a deeper belief that divine beings existed beyond the limitations of human understanding, able to reveal themselves in whatever form best expressed their nature. Along the Nile lived one of the most powerful creatures in Egypt, the crocodile. Its strength and unpredictability inspired both fear and reverence among the people who depended on the river for life. From this powerful animal emerged the crocodile-headed god Sobek. Sobek represented the Nile's immense power, its ability to nourish crops while also posing danger to those who approached its waters. Temples dedicated to Sobek sometimes housed living crocodiles that were treated as sacred animals. Priests fed them carefully and adorned them with jewelry, honoring them as living representations of the god. When these sacred crocodiles died, they were mummified and buried with ceremonial respect. Archaeologists have discovered entire cemeteries filled with crocodile mummies prepared in elaborate rituals. Sobek's dual nature reflected the Nile itself, both life-giving and potentially deadly. To live safely beside the river meant respecting its power and honoring the god believed to control it. Among all Egyptian deities, few were as closely connected to the journey after death as Anubis. With the sleek head of a jackal and the body of a man, Anubis watched over burial rituals and protected the resting places of the deceased. Jackals were often seen near desert graveyards, and Egyptians transformed this scavenger into a divine guardian. Anubis played a central role in the famous judgment scene, known as the weighing of the heart. In this ceremony, the heart of the deceased was placed on a scale opposite the feather of truth. Anubis carefully adjusted the balance, ensuring fairness in the judgment. Priests performing embalming rituals sometimes wore jackal masks, symbolically becoming representatives of Anubis during the mummification process. For ancient Egyptians, Anubis was both protector and guide, a divine companion who helped the soul safely navigate the mysterious path to eternity. In Egyptian cosmology, the sky itself was imagined as a living goddess. Her name was Nut. Nut was often depicted as a woman whose long, arching body stretched across the heavens from horizon to horizon. Her skin was covered with stars, forming the night sky above the earth. Each evening, the sun was believed to enter Nut's mouth and travel through her body during the night. At dawn, she gave birth to the sun once more, allowing a new day to begin. Through this mythic cycle, Egyptians explained the daily rhythm of sunset and sunrise. The universe itself was imagined as a living system in which gods and cosmic forces worked together to maintain balance. Nut also played a protective role. Many tomb ceilings were painted with her star-covered figure, symbolizing the hope that the dead would rest safely beneath her eternal embrace among the stars. Another powerful deity of Egypt was the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet. Sekhmet embodied both destruction and protection. In myth, her fiery breath created the scorching desert winds, and her anger could unleash plagues upon Egypt's enemies. One famous legend tells how Sekhmet nearly destroyed humanity during a violent rage. To stop her, the gods poured large quantities of beer dyed red across the land. Mistaking it for blood, Sekhmet drank deeply, became intoxicated, and fell asleep, saving humanity from destruction. Despite her fearsome reputation, Sekhmet was also revered as a goddess of healing. Her priests were known as skilled physicians who practiced medicine within temple complexes. Temples dedicated to Sekhmet often contained hundreds of statues of the goddess, believed to channel and control her immense power. Through her dual nature, Sekhmet symbolized an important Egyptian idea. The same force that destroys can also heal and protect. Many Egyptian temples contain sacred lakes within their walls. These artificial pools played an important role in temple rituals and daily religious practices. Before performing ceremonies, priests would bathe in the sacred waters to purify themselves physically and spiritually. Cleanliness was considered essential when approaching the presence of the gods. These lakes also symbolized the primordial waters from which the world was believed to have emerged at the beginning of creation. By including them within temple complexes, Egyptians recreated a miniature version of the universe itself. During certain festivals, statues of the gods were carried aboard sacred boats that sailed across these temple lakes. The quiet movement of these boats reflected the mythical journeys of the gods across the cosmic waters. Thus, the temple lake was not merely decorative. It was a symbolic space connecting the rituals of daily worship with the origins of the universe. Temple priests in ancient Egypt followed extremely strict rules of cleanliness and discipline. One of the most unusual practices was the removal of all body hair. Priests regularly shaved their heads, faces, and entire bodies to maintain ritual purity. This was not done for appearance, but as part of a deeper spiritual tradition. They bathed several times each day in clean water and wore fresh linen garments reserved for sacred duties. Certain foods were avoided before ceremonies to maintain purity. These practices reflected a fundamental Egyptian belief that those who serve the gods must remain completely free from impurity. The temple was considered a sacred space where the divine presence could dwell, and priests acted as its caretakers. Through constant discipline and purification, they maintained the delicate boundary between the ordinary human world and the realm of the gods. Colors carried deep symbolic meaning in Egyptian art and religion, and few were more significant than blue. Blue represented the vast waters of the Nile and the heavens above. Both were sources of life and creation in the Egyptian worldview. The color therefore came to symbolize protection, rebirth, and divine power. Artists used blue pigments in temple paintings, statues, jewelry, and sacred objects. Sometimes they created a special material known as Egyptian blue, one of the earliest synthetic pigments in history. This brilliant color often appeared in depictions of gods, protective amulets, and decorative designs intended to invoke the life-giving forces of the universe. To the people of ancient Egypt, blue was not just a color. It was a reminder of the eternal waters of creation and the protective power of the sky itself. Blue was the color of creation and protection. In the symbolic language of ancient Egypt, colors were never chosen randomly. Each shade carried a deeper spiritual meaning, and among them, blue held one of the most powerful associations. To the Egyptians, blue represented the life-giving waters of the Nile, the endless sky stretching above the desert, and the vast heavens where the gods resided. Because of these associations, blue became closely connected to creation, fertility, and divine protection. It symbolized the very forces that sustained life and maintained the cosmic balance known as Ma'at. To capture this sacred color in their art, Egyptian craftsmen developed one of the world's earliest synthetic pigments, now known as Egyptian blue. Created by heating a mixture of sand, copper compounds, limestone, and alkali at high temperatures, the result was a vibrant pigment that could be used in wall paintings, statues, jewelry, and ceremonial objects. This luminous blue appeared across temples, tombs, and royal artifacts. It decorated amulets, beads, faience tiles, and protective charms, surrounding sacred spaces with the color of divine life. Some gods were even depicted with blue skin, emphasizing their cosmic and supernatural nature. Deities such as Ammonius and Hathor were occasionally represented this way, highlighting their connection to the heavens and the creative forces of the universe. For ordinary Egyptians, wearing blue jewelry or carrying blue amulets was believed to bring blessings, spiritual protection, and harmony. In this way, the color blue was more than decoration. It was a powerful symbol of the universe itself, of sky, water, creation, and the divine forces that sustained existence. Red symbolized both life and destruction. While blue symbolized harmony and creation, red represented the powerful and unpredictable forces of life itself. In ancient Egyptian symbolism, red was a color of striking duality. On one hand, it represented vitality, strength, and life energy. The intense heat of the desert sun and the life-giving warmth it provided were closely linked to this vibrant color. Artists often used red ochre to paint the skin of male figures in wall paintings and statues, symbolizing health, power, and physical strength. But red also carried darker meanings. It was associated with chaos, danger, and destructive power, qualities linked to the desert lands that surrounded Egypt and the god Set, who embodied disorder and conflict. Because of this dual nature, red was both respected and feared. In magical practices and protective rituals, red ink was sometimes used to write the names of dangerous beings or hostile spirits. By recording these names in red, priests believed they could contain or neutralize their power, transforming threat into control. This balance between creation and destruction made red one of the most potent symbolic colors in Egyptian culture. It served as a reminder that the same forces that nurtured life could also bring devastation. To the Egyptians, red represented the delicate balance between order and chaos, a balance that defined the world they lived in. Scarab beetle amulets were worn for protection. Among the many symbols of ancient Egypt, few were as recognizable or meaningful as the scarab beetle. This humble insect became a powerful representation of rebirth, renewal, and the eternal cycle of the sun. Egyptians observed how scarab beetles rolled small balls of dung across the ground, and this behavior reminded them of the sun god Ra, pushing the blazing sun across the sky each day. From this simple observation grew a profound symbol of cosmic order. Scarab-shaped amulets were worn by people of all social classes as charms for luck, protection, and spiritual renewal. These small objects were often carved from stone, faience, or precious metals, and many were engraved with prayers, names, or protective spells. Some scarabs were designed as personal seals, while others served as powerful spiritual talismans. One of the most important forms was the heart scarab, a large amulet placed on the chest of a mummy during burial. These scarabs were inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead, asking the heart not to betray the soul during the judgment in the afterlife. Scarab amulets were not only worn in life, but also buried with the dead, and even exchanged as diplomatic gifts between kingdoms. To carry a scarab was to carry a reminder of the sun's eternal journey across the sky, a symbol that life, like the sun, would rise again. Amulets hidden in mummy wrappings for protection. The process of mummification in ancient Egypt was far more than a method of preserving the body. It was a deeply spiritual ritual designed to protect the soul on its journey into the afterlife. One of the most important parts of this ritual involved placing protective amulets within the layers of linen wrappings surrounding the mummy. These small charms were carefully positioned in specific places across the body, each one serving a unique protective purpose. Different amulets carried different powers. The Ankh symbolized eternal life. The Eye of Horus provided healing and protection. The scarab represented rebirth. The Jed pillar symbolized stability and endurance. The Tayat knot, associated with the goddess Isis, offered divine protection. Many of these amulets were engraved with magical texts or spells taken directly from the Book of the Dead, activating their spiritual power. Priests followed a strict ritual order when placing these charms, ensuring that every part of the body was spiritually guarded. Together, the amulets formed a kind of invisible armor, protecting the soul from dangers in the underworld and guiding it safely toward eternal paradise. Hidden beneath the linen layers, these objects reveal an important truth about Egyptian belief. Mummification was not simply about preserving the body, it was about protecting the soul for eternity. Jewelry held deep symbolic meanings. In ancient Egypt, jewelry was far more than simple decoration. It was a visible expression of spiritual belief, identity, and magical protection. Every material and color used in Egyptian jewelry carried symbolic meaning. Gold, for example, was associated with the flesh of the gods and symbolized eternity and divine perfection. Because gold did not tarnish or decay, it became a powerful metaphor for immortality. Other materials also carried special meanings. Turquoise symbolized joy, fertility, and good fortune. Carnelian represented vitality, courage, and life energy. Lapis lazuli reflected the deep blue of the heavens. Jewelry designs often included sacred symbols such as lotus flowers, falcons, cobras, and scarabs, each representing divine forces or protective powers. Both the wealthy and ordinary people wore jewelry, though the materials varied. The elite used gold and precious stones, while others crafted beautiful pieces from faience, glazed ceramics, or colored glass. In life, jewelry signaled status, belief, and personal protection. In death, it accompanied the owner into the tomb, ensuring that the wearer carried the blessings of the gods into the afterlife. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Intricate beadwork, delicate metalwork, and perfectly balanced designs demonstrate the remarkable skill of Egyptian artisans. For the Egyptians, a necklace, bracelet, or ring was not simply an ornament. It was a prayer made visible, a sacred object carrying divine protection. Statues with crystal eyes seemed almost alive. Egyptian sculptors aimed to create statues that were not merely artistic representations, but spiritual vessels capable of housing divine presence. One technique that enhanced this effect was the creation of inlaid eyes. Instead of carving the eyes directly from stone, artists used materials such as rock crystal, quartz, and obsidian. These pieces were carefully shaped and inserted into a white stone base, forming a strikingly lifelike eye. The crystal surface reflected light in a way that made the gaze appear almost alive. Many observers have noted that these statues seem to watch viewers from across a room, their expressions intense and strangely lifelike. Such statues were placed in temples, tombs, and shrines where they served as physical representations of gods, kings, or honored ancestors. The realism was not only an artistic achievement, it was a form of spiritual technology. Egyptians believed that a statue with lifelike features allowed the spirit it represented to see, observe, and interact with the living world. In many cases, the eyes were the most carefully crafted part of the statue. because the gaze itself was believed to be a powerful conduit between the physical world and the divine realm. The crook and flail symbolized power and prosperity. Among the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egyptian kingship were the crook and the flail, two ceremonial objects frequently shown crossed over the chest of the pharaoh in statues, carvings, and royal regalia. The crook, shaped like a shepherd's staff, represented the king as the protector and caretaker of his people. Just as a shepherd guides and safeguards his flock, the pharaoh was believed to guide and protect the nation. This symbol emphasized the ruler's responsibility to maintain harmony, provide leadership, and ensure the safety of the kingdom. The flail, on the other hand, had strong connections to agriculture. Originally associated with threshing grain, it symbolized fertility, abundance, and the prosperity of the land. Through this emblem, the pharaoh was portrayed as the provider who guaranteed successful harvests and the continued wealth of Egypt. Both objects also carried deep religious meaning. The crook was closely linked to Osiris, the god of the afterlife and rebirth, while the flail reflected the life-giving power of agriculture that sustained Egyptian civilization. Together, these symbols represented the dual nature of kingship: guidance and provision, protection and prosperity. They appeared frequently in temple reliefs, royal statues, and ceremonial imagery, reminding viewers that the pharaoh was not merely a political leader. To the ancient Egyptians, he was the earthly embodiment of cosmic order, chosen by the gods to maintain balance in the world. Ancient Egypt had a sophisticated tax system. Behind the grandeur of Egypt's temples, pyramids, and monuments stood a highly organized administrative system. One of the foundations of that system was a complex and carefully managed tax structure. Unlike modern societies that rely on currency, taxes in ancient Egypt were usually paid in goods and labor rather than money. Farmers contributed a portion of their harvest, while others provided livestock, textiles, crafted goods, or periods of service on state projects. Government officials and scribes traveled along the Nile to measure farmland and assess agricultural yields. Using simple surveying tools and detailed records, they determined how much tax each landowner owed. The collected resources supported many aspects of Egyptian society. Grain and supplies fed workers on massive construction projects, including temples, canals, and pyramids. Taxes also funded the maintenance of temples, supported the priesthood, and supplied the army. All of these transactions were carefully documented. Scribes recorded tax obligations and payments on papyrus scrolls and ostraca, fragments of pottery used for writing notes. These records reveal an impressive level of administrative organization. Failing to pay taxes could result in penalties such as fines, confiscation of property, or forced labor. Trade goods entering Egypt were also taxed, ensuring that the state benefited from the country's position as a major hub of commerce. This network of taxation, record-keeping, and administration helped sustain Egypt's economy for centuries and played a crucial role in funding the civilization's greatest achievements. Pyramid builders were paid in bread and beer. For many years, people believed that the pyramids were constructed by slaves. However, modern archaeological discoveries have revealed a very different reality. The massive pyramids were built by skilled workers organized into rotating labor crews, many of whom were respected members of Egyptian society. Instead of receiving wages in coins, workers were paid in the most essential staples of Egyptian life: bread and beer. A typical daily ration could include several loaves of bread and large quantities of beer. Egyptian beer was thick, nutritious, and rich in grains, providing both hydration and calories necessary for heavy physical labor under the intense desert sun. Paying workers with food made practical sense in a society that had not yet developed a formal currency system. Bread and beer were everyday necessities, so wages directly supported the workers' survival and well-being. Excavations near the Giza Plateau have uncovered entire workers' villages complete with large bakeries and breweries. These facilities produce thousands of loaves of bread and massive vats of beer every day to supply the labor force. This system ensured that workers remained healthy, productive, and loyal to the state. Far from being oppressed slaves, many of these builders were proud participants in projects that honored the pharaoh and secured Egypt's legacy for eternity. Workers' villages reveal everyday life. Archaeological discoveries have uncovered entire villages built to house the workers responsible for Egypt's greatest monuments. One of the best preserved examples is Deir el-Medina, the settlement where artisans and craftsmen lived while constructing the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Unlike temporary camps, these villages were carefully planned communities. They contained stone houses, narrow streets, storage rooms, and communal spaces where residents lived with their families. Many houses had multiple rooms and even decorative wall paintings. Excavations have revealed tools, furniture, personal objects, and written records that provide remarkable insights into daily life. Inscriptions discovered in these villages record work schedules, disputes between neighbors, wage payments, and even personal letters. These findings show that the workers were not anonymous laborers, but skilled professionals with organized social lives, religious traditions, and strong community ties. The preservation of these settlements offers historians a rare window into the human side of Egypt's monumental achievements. Behind every temple and tomb stood communities of artisans whose craftsmanship and dedication made these wonders possible. Egyptian art followed strict rules of proportion. Ancient Egyptian art may appear simple at first glance, but it was governed by carefully defined artistic rules that remained consistent for centuries. Egyptian artists did not aim for realism in the modern sense. Instead, their goal was to create images that expressed order, clarity, and eternal truth. To achieve this, artists used a grid system that divided the human body into standardized units. Each body part had a specific proportional placement within this grid, ensuring that figures remained consistent regardless of scale or location. This method allowed artists across different generations and regions to maintain a recognizable and unified style. Hierarchy was also an important rule. Important figures such as gods and pharaohs were depicted much larger than ordinary people, symbolizing their higher status and divine authority. Perspective followed specific conventions as well. Heads and legs were usually shown in profile, while torsos faced forward. This distinctive style allowed each part of the body to be displayed in its most recognizable form. These artistic rules were deeply connected to Egyptian beliefs about cosmic order and permanence. By following strict conventions, artists ensured that their images remained timeless, preserving the identity and essence of the people and gods they represented. Faces were drawn in profile with forward-facing eyes. One of the most recognizable features of ancient Egyptian art is its composite view of the human body. In these images, the head is shown from the side, revealing the clear outline of the face and nose. Yet the eye is drawn as if viewed from the front, appearing large and almond-shaped. At the same time, the shoulders face forward while the legs and feet return to a side profile. This unusual combination was not a mistake. It was a deliberate artistic decision designed to show every part of the body from its most identifiable angle. Rather than creating realistic perspective, Egyptian artists prioritized clarity and completeness. This approach also ensured that the identity and essence of the person depicted could be easily recognized. The same conventions were used when portraying animals and gods, creating a visual language that was both symbolic and immediately understandable. For the Egyptians, these images were not simply decorative. They were believed to preserve the spiritual presence of the person or deity depicted, allowing their essence to exist eternally within the carved or painted image. Temple reliefs were painted and repainted for centuries. Today, many Egyptian temples appear as bare stone structures, but in ancient times, they were vividly colored works of art. Temple walls and relief carvings were originally painted in bright shades of red, blue, green, yellow, and gold. These colors brought scenes of gods, rituals, and historical events to life. Over the centuries, these images were often repainted. Sometimes this was done simply to restore faded colors and keep the artwork vibrant. In other cases, new rulers altered the imagery to emphasize their own authority. A pharaoh might replace the face or name of a predecessor with his own, ensuring that his legacy remained visible within sacred spaces. Religious changes could also lead to modifications. When certain gods gained or lost importance, temple scenes were updated to reflect new beliefs. Modern scientific analysis has revealed multiple layers of paint on many temple walls, showing how these monuments evolved across generations. This practice demonstrates that temples were not static monuments but living religious centers, constantly renewed and maintained to honor the gods. Lost cities lie beneath the Nile Delta. The Nile Delta once supported many thriving cities, ports, and temples that played key roles in Egypt's economy and religious life. However, over thousands of years, changes in the Nile's course and the gradual rise of water levels caused many of these settlements to become buried beneath layers of silt. Some cities eventually sank beneath the Mediterranean Sea. Using underwater archaeology and ground-penetrating radar, researchers have discovered several of these lost locations, including the ancient cities of Thonis Heraclean and Canopus. These submerged ruins contain statues, temple fragments, anchors, pottery, and everyday objects preserved in mud and water. Because they were sealed beneath sediment, many artifacts remain remarkably well preserved. The discovery of these cities has provided valuable insight into Egypt's trade networks, religious practices, and interactions with other civilizations around the Mediterranean. These hidden settlements remind us that a large portion of Egypt's ancient world still lies beneath the surface, waiting to be rediscovered. Flooded temples beneath Lake Nasser. In the 1960s, the construction of the Aswan High Dam dramatically changed the landscape of southern Egypt. As the dam created the massive reservoir known as Lake Nasser, vast areas of ancient land were flooded. Many temples and archaeological sites were threatened by the rising waters. Some monuments, including the famous temples of Abu Simbel, were rescued through international efforts and relocated to higher ground. However, many smaller temples and settlements were left behind. Today, beneath the waters of Lake Nasser lie submerged ruins, tombs, and ancient structures preserved beneath layers of silt. Although these sites are difficult to access, they act as underwater time capsules that still hold valuable information about Egypt's past. Occasional diving expeditions and rare drops in water levels reveal glimpses of these hidden relics. These submerged monuments serve as a reminder of the delicate balance between modern development and the preservation of ancient history. Some mummies are better preserved than modern bodies. The embalming techniques developed by ancient Egyptians were so advanced that many mummies remain astonishingly well preserved even after more than 3,000 years. In some cases, skin, hair, fingernails, and even tattoos are still visible. Modern scientific analysis has shown that Egyptian embalmers used a combination of methods that created an environment highly resistant to decay. Internal organs were carefully removed, and the body was dried using natron, a naturally occurring salt that absorbed moisture. The body was then treated with aromatic resins and wrapped in layers of linen. This process effectively eliminated bacteria and slowed the breakdown of tissues. As a result, many mummies are preserved in conditions that rival or even exceed the results of some modern preservation methods. For archaeologists and scientists, these remarkably intact remains provide valuable information about ancient health, diet, diseases, and cultural practices. They offer a direct connection to individuals who lived thousands of years ago, preserving not only their bodies but also pieces of their personal stories. Some mummies are preserved with astonishing detail. In some extraordinary cases, ancient Egyptian mummies are preserved so well that facial expressions, scars, and even injuries remain visible after thousands of years. This remarkable level of preservation allows modern scientists to study not only the physical appearance of ancient individuals, but also details about their lives. Broken bones, surgical procedures, illnesses, and signs of disease can still be detected through modern imaging techniques. For the Egyptians, however, the purpose of such preservation was not scientific. It was deeply spiritual. They believed the body had to remain intact so that the soul could recognize and return to it in the afterlife. If the body decayed or was destroyed, the soul's journey to eternity could be jeopardized. Because of this belief, embalmers treated the body with extraordinary care and precision. The results were so effective that some mummies have survived in better condition than bodies preserved using certain early modern embalming techniques. This extraordinary preservation reflects the advanced knowledge and meticulous skill of ancient Egyptian funerary science, a tradition developed over centuries through observation, experimentation, and religious devotion. Ancient embalming recipes used exotic resins. The process of mummification required a wide variety of specialized materials, many of which were imported from distant lands. Egyptian embalmers relied heavily on natural resins, oils, and aromatic substances that helped preserve the body and slow decomposition. Resins from conifer trees were particularly valuable because of their natural antibacterial properties. Bitumen, a tar-like substance often sourced from the Dead Sea, was also used to seal tissues and prevent decay. Other ingredients came from far beyond Egypt's borders. Myrrh and frankincense, obtained from the mysterious land of Punt, were prized for their fragrance and symbolic connection to the gods. Cedar oil, imported from the forests of Lebanon, was another important component used in embalming treatments. These materials served multiple purposes. They helped preserve the body, masked unpleasant odors, and carried religious meaning. Pleasant scents were associated with purity and divine presence. The use of such rare substances reveals that mummification was not only a sacred ritual, but also part of a vast international trade network connecting Egypt with distant regions of Africa and the Near East. Modern chemical analysis of mummy wrappings has confirmed the presence of these imported materials, demonstrating that the preparation of the dead combined religious ceremony, scientific knowledge, and global commerce. Canopic jars protected the organs of the dead. During the mummification process, embalmers removed several internal organs that would otherwise decay quickly. The liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines were carefully treated and then placed inside special containers known as canopic jars. Each jar was associated with one of the four sons of Horus, divine protectors who guarded these organs in the afterlife. Each guardian had a distinctive appearance. A human-headed jar protected the liver. A baboon-headed jar guarded the lungs. A jackal-headed jar protected the stomach. A falcon-headed jar safeguarded the intestines. These jars were often beautifully crafted from limestone, alabaster, or other fine materials. Many were decorated with inscriptions and magical spells meant to protect the organs. Interestingly, the heart was usually left inside the body, as it was believed to be the center of intelligence, emotion, and moral judgment. During the afterlife, the heart would be weighed against the feather of truth in a divine trial. The brain, by contrast, was considered far less important and was typically removed and discarded during embalming. Placed beside the mummy within the tomb, the canopic jars played a vital role in ensuring that the body remained complete and ready for rebirth in the next world. Pharaohs hid their tombs to prevent robbery. Tomb robbery was a serious problem in ancient Egypt because royal burials were filled with gold, jewelry, statues, and precious objects. They were tempting targets for thieves. Even during the time of the pharaohs themselves, grave robbing was a constant threat. To protect their final resting places, some rulers designed elaborate and secretive tombs. Architects created hidden entrances, misleading corridors, and false chambers meant to confuse intruders. Some passages ended in dead ends, while others led away from the true burial chamber. In certain cases, the exact location of the tomb was kept secret even from most workers involved in its construction. Remote areas were often chosen for burial sites, particularly isolated valleys surrounded by steep cliffs. One of the most famous of these locations became known as the Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs of the New Kingdom were buried. Despite these precautions, many tombs were eventually discovered and looted in antiquity. Nevertheless, the effort to conceal them shows how deeply Egyptians feared the consequences of tomb violation. Disturbing a burial site was believed to threaten the deceased's soul and disrupt their eternal life. The Valley of the Kings contains over 60 royal tombs. Located on the west bank of the Nile near modern Luxor, the Valley of the Kings served as the royal burial ground for nearly 5 centuries during Egypt's New Kingdom. More than 60 tombs have been discovered within the valley's cliffs. Some are relatively simple burial chambers, while others extend deep into the rock through long corridors decorated with elaborate carvings and paintings. These tombs were designed not only to house the pharaoh's body, but also to guide the ruler's spirit through the dangerous journey of the underworld. Their walls are covered with scenes from sacred texts such as the Book of the Dead, the Amulets, and other funerary writings. These images depict gods, demons, protective spells, and the pharaoh's journey toward eternal life. Several famous rulers were buried here, including Ramesses II, Seti I, and Tutankhamun. Although many tombs were robbed in ancient times, the surviving artwork remains among the most breathtaking examples of Egyptian religious art. Even today, archaeologists continue to make discoveries in the valley, proving that Egypt still holds many secrets waiting to be revealed. Tutankhamun's tomb contained over 5,000 objects. In 1922, archaeologist Howard Carter made one of the most famous discoveries in history when he uncovered the tomb of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun. Unlike many royal tombs, this one had remained largely intact. Inside, Carter found an astonishing treasure trove containing more than 5,000 objects. The chambers were packed with golden shrines, chariots, statues, jewelry, clothing, weapons, furniture, and ceremonial objects. Even everyday items were included, such as sandals, jars of food, linen garments, and board games. These objects reflected the Egyptian belief that the afterlife was essentially a continuation of earthly life. The king would need everything he used during life in order to live comfortably in eternity. Because Tutankhamun's tomb was relatively small for a pharaoh, the items were crowded together in what appeared almost like a royal storeroom frozen in time. This discovery provided historians with the most complete picture ever found of an Egyptian royal burial. Tutankhamun's golden mask is one of the world's greatest artifacts. Among the treasures discovered in Tutankhamun's tomb, none is more famous than his burial mask. This extraordinary masterpiece was crafted from over 20 pounds of solid gold and decorated with inlays of lapis lazuli, quartz, obsidian, and colored glass. The mask depicts the young king's calm and idealized face, wearing the traditional striped headdress of Egyptian royalty. More than just a portrait, the mask served a sacred purpose. It acted as a magical protector, ensuring that the pharaoh's spirit could safely recognize and inhabit his body in the afterlife. Inscriptions carved on the mask include protective spells taken from the Book of the Dead, intended to guard the king on his journey beyond death. The craftsmanship demonstrates the extraordinary skill of Egyptian goldsmiths, who were able to shape and join precious metals with remarkable precision. When Howard Carter first lifted the mask from the mummy, he was witnessing an object that had remained untouched for more than 3,000 years. The curse of Tutankhamun is likely a myth. After the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, stories quickly spread about a mysterious curse placed upon anyone who disturbed the king's burial. The legend gained momentum when Lord Carnarvon, the wealthy patron who funded the excavation, died shortly after the tomb's opening. Newspapers around the world sensationalized the story, suggesting supernatural punishment for those who had entered the tomb. However, historical evidence tells a different story. Most members of the excavation team lived long lives, including Howard Carter himself. Modern historians believe the curse legend was largely the result of media exaggeration, coincidence, and public fascination with ancient mysteries. Some researchers have also suggested that sealed tombs might have contained mold or bacteria that could have caused illness. Regardless of the truth, the myth of the curse has endured for more than a century, becoming part of the enduring mystique surrounding ancient Egypt. Animal mummification was practiced on a massive scale. Mummification was not reserved only for humans. Ancient Egyptians also preserved animals, often for religious purposes. Animals such as cats, ibises, crocodiles, bulls, dogs, and falcons were closely associated with specific gods. Some animals were beloved pets buried alongside their owners. Others were raised specifically to be sacrificed and mummified as offerings to the gods. Pilgrims visiting temples could purchase a mummified animal as a religious offering. The process closely resembled human mummification. The bodies were dried, wrapped in linen, and sometimes placed in decorative coffins or jars. Archaeologists have discovered enormous burial grounds filled with these animal mummies. Millions of animal mummies have been discovered. Excavations across Egypt have revealed vast catacombs filled with animal mummies, sometimes numbering in the millions. At Saqqara, underground tunnels contain enormous quantities of mummified ibises, dogs, falcons, and other creatures. Some were wrapped with great care using fine linen and resin. Others appear to have been produced quickly in large numbers, suggesting a mass religious industry. The scale of these discoveries indicates that animal mummification supported an entire economy involving breeders, embalmers, temple officials, and merchants. These findings also provide valuable information about ancient animal breeding and trade networks used to supply the temples with sacred creatures. Sacred bulls were buried in massive stone coffins. One of the most revered animals in Egyptian religion was the Apis bull. This bull was believed to be a living manifestation of a powerful deity and was later associated with the god Osiris. Chosen based on specific sacred markings, each Apis bull lived a life of great honor in the city of Memphis. When the bull died, it received a lavish burial ceremony similar to that of a king. At Saqqara's Serapeum, enormous underground chambers contain gigantic stone sarcophagi built specifically for these sacred animals. Some of these granite coffins weigh over 70 tons, making them among the largest stone sarcophagi ever constructed. The scale of these burials demonstrates the immense religious importance of the Apis bull and the deep respect Egyptians had for the animals they believed carried divine power. The Apis bull and its divine burials. The sacred Apis bull held a status in Egyptian religion that rivaled even human royalty. Its tombs were not simple graves. They were part of an elaborate underground complex, carefully designed to reflect the bull's divine importance. Priests attended every burial ceremony, performing rituals and leaving offerings to honor the animal as a living god in its own right. Each burial underscored a central belief in ancient Egypt. These animals were more than symbols. They were embodiments of the divine. From the careful wrapping to the placement of treasures in the tomb, every detail was intended to ensure the Apis bull's continued protection and eternal presence in the spiritual realm. At sites like Saqqara, massive stone sarcophagi were constructed to house these sacred animals. Some weighed over 70 tons, testament not only to the Egyptians' engineering skill, but also to the profound religious significance they attributed to these beings. The tombs served as a reminder that divine care extended beyond humanity, and that the gods' earthly manifestations demanded the highest honor in death. Egypt's empire extended far beyond the Nile. At the height of the New Kingdom, Egypt was no longer a land confined to the Nile Valley. Pharaohs commanded territories stretching into modern-day Sudan, Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, creating an empire rich in resources, culture, and influence. Conquered regions supplied Egypt with valuable materials: gold from Nubia, cedar from Lebanon, and tribute from vassal states across the Near East. These areas were not merely annexed, they were integrated into Egypt's political, economic, and cultural system. Fortresses, garrisons, and diplomatic marriages ensured both control and loyalty. This imperial reach also facilitated the exchange of ideas, art, and religion. Egyptian temples, jewelry, and iconography influenced far-flung regions, while foreign gods, architectural styles, and luxury goods returned to Egypt, creating a dynamic cultural dialogue that enriched both the empire and its neighbors. Lapis lazuli, a treasure from afar. Among Egypt's most prized treasures was lapis lazuli, a deep blue stone flecked with golden pyrite. Symbolizing the heavens and divine protection, it adorned royal jewelry, amulets, and ceremonial objects. Lapis lazuli was not native to Egypt. It came from mines in what is now Afghanistan, more than 2,000 miles away. The stone's journey spanned deserts, mountains, and rivers, moving through the hands of merchants and traders across Mesopotamia and the Levant before arriving in Egypt. Its value went beyond material wealth. Lapis lazuli carried cosmic symbolism, embodying Egypt's connection to the divine and the vast network of trade that linked the ancient world centuries before the modern era. Its presence in tombs like that of Tutankhamun demonstrates Egypt's far-reaching influence and the importance of spiritual power in material form. Incense and the mysterious land of Punt. Incense, burned in temples to honor the gods and purify sacred spaces, was another essential import. The finest frankincense and myrrh came from Punt, a distant, enigmatic land along the Red Sea or Horn of Africa. Reliefs from the reign of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahri depict Egyptian ships returning from Punt laden with incense, gold, ivory, and exotic animals. Some illustrations even show transplanted incense trees and the lush landscapes of Punt. The precise location of Punt remains one of ancient Egypt's enduring mysteries, with scholars placing it in parts of modern Eritrea, Somalia, or eastern Sudan. The land held a near-mythical status in Egyptian imagination, a source of divine goods and blessings. Its connection to Egypt symbolized both wealth and spiritual favor, and the fragrance of its incense rose like prayers into the realm of the gods. Egyptian ships ventured deep into the Red Sea. Reaching Punt required sturdy seagoing vessels, crafted from imported cedar from Lebanon. Egyptian shipbuilders lashed planks together with ropes, creating vessels capable of surviving the Red Sea's treacherous waters. Large crews rowed alongside square sails, carefully managing cargo holds filled with exotic goods. Expeditions often lasted months and relied on seasonal winds. Archaeological sites such as Wadi Gawassis have preserved remnants of these ships, ropes, and storage boxes, offering tangible evidence of Egypt's maritime sophistication. These voyages were more than trade missions. They were demonstrations of the pharaoh's power, ambition, and willingness to extend Egypt's influence far beyond the safety of the Nile. Chariots revolutionized Egyptian warfare. The introduction of the horse-drawn chariot transformed the Egyptian army. Likely adopted during the Second Intermediate Period from the Hyksos, chariots offered unprecedented mobility and speed on the battlefield. Light and maneuverable, chariots allowed archers to fire from moving platforms, dramatically increasing effectiveness. By the New Kingdom, chariots were symbols of royal authority, appearing in both battle and ceremonial contexts. Pharaohs like Ramesses II are depicted leading chariot charges, bow drawn, trampling enemies in a show of divine strength. Elite units required skilled drivers and archers, highlighting the specialized nature of Egypt's military. The arrival of chariots enabled more aggressive campaigns and extended Egypt's reach, solidifying the pharaoh's power both at home and abroad. Pharaohs as divine military leaders. While many rulers delegated military command to generals, others, like Thutmose III, personally led campaigns across Nubia and the Levant. Known as Egypt's Napoleon, Thutmose III expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent. Ramesses II famously commanded at the Battle of Kadesh, directing chariots and archers in chaotic combat. Beyond strategy, such leadership reinforced the pharaoh's divine mandate as protector of Egypt. Military victories were immortalized on temple walls, merging historical events with religious propaganda to ensure the king's fame endured for eternity. Victory stele, propaganda, and sacred record. Egyptian rulers commemorated triumphs with stele, tall stone slabs inscribed with battle accounts. These texts often exaggerated victories, portraying the pharaoh as a god-favored hero. The Battle of Kadesh, for instance, is described in multiple temples with nearly identical inscriptions, each casting Ramesses II as the singular architect of victory. Stele served multiple purposes. They honored the gods, inspired loyalty, intimidated rivals, and cemented the ruler's legacy. Even when factual accuracy was questionable, these records provide invaluable insight into Egyptian concepts of warfare, kingship, and divine favor. Ancient Egypt's legacy lasted over 3,000 years. From the unification around 3100 BCE to Roman conquest in 30 BCE, Egypt maintained a distinctive identity for more than 3 millennia. Its art, architecture, religion, and political systems evolved but remained recognizably Egyptian. Stability allowed continuous cultural development, enabling monumental achievements like the pyramids, temples, and tombs. Egypt's influence extended far beyond its borders. Its ideas inspired Greece, Rome, and later Islamic civilizations, while its religious and artistic traditions shaped neighboring cultures. The civilization's enduring legacy reminds us that Egypt's combination of power, faith, and ingenuity has few parallels in human history. Egypt, the echoes of eternity. The sheer longevity of Egypt's civilization stands as a testament to its extraordinary ability to adapt while preserving tradition, making it one of the most enduring cultures in human history. Even in the wake of conquest, Egyptian culture left its indelible mark on its invaders. Egypt was ruled by Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, and Romans. Yet each new ruler adopted the essence of Egyptian identity. Foreign kings were depicted in pharaonic dress, built temples to Egyptian gods, and participated in the sacred ceremonies of the Nile. The Ptolemaic dynasty of Greek origin blended Hellenistic and Egyptian traditions, producing rulers like Cleopatra III, who embraced native customs. Roman emperors continued to fund temples and monuments long after Egypt became a province. This resilience ensured that even when politically dominated, Egypt remained spiritually and artistically distinct, influencing its conquerors as profoundly as they influenced it. Monuments that defy time. The monuments of ancient Egypt are living echoes of eternity. From the towering pyramids of Giza to the sprawling temples of Karnak and Luxor, these structures have withstood thousands of years. Carved from massive stone blocks, fitted so precisely that they endure earthquakes, floods, and the relentless passage of time, they were designed with immortality in mind. Hieroglyphs etched into walls still whisper stories of creation, conquest, and devotion. Statues gaze silently across centuries, as if witnessing every generation of humanity that has come and gone. These monuments are not relics. They are tangible connections to a civilization that sought eternity, and standing before them, one can feel the weight of millennia pressing gently upon the present. Walking through the lives of Egypt, our journey through the wonders of ancient Egypt comes to a gentle close. We have walked among temples whose columns rise like forests of stone, traced the slow curves of hieroglyphs carved thousands of years ago, and stood beside statues whose silent eyes have gazed unblinking through centuries. We have felt the whisper of desert winds against pyramid walls and heard the faint echo of footsteps in tombs, where kings still lie wrapped in the dreams of eternity. Egypt's story is not only one of gold, grandeur, and monuments, but of people. Scribes, bending over papyrus by lamplight. Artisans, shaping the eyes of gods from crystal. Boatmen, steering cargo along the slow green Nile. It is the story of a civilization that reached for the eternal, and in many ways touched it. The eternal Nile at dusk. Now, as the sands settle and the last light fades behind the desert hills, let your thoughts drift like a boat on the Nile at dusk. The world grows quiet, stars begin to bloom overhead, and the voices of the past soften. Monuments dissolve into shadow, and time itself seems to slow. Rest here, traveler. Carry with you the knowledge that Egypt endures, in stone, in memory, and in the still places of the mind, where history becomes dream. When you awaken, the wonders of the ancient world will still be waiting. And if you join me again, another story of science, history, or the cosmos will unfold slowly, quietly, like a candle being lit in the dark. Sleep well, traveler.